I've always thought that the X-Men were best when they were on the run, and man does this issue prove that right. Let's not bury the lead. This is a great issue. I'm not going to claim it's a return to form, but it's definitely a move in the right direction. It almost feels like an X-Men comic. It's closer to Grant Morrison's wonkiness on the new X-Men than anything from the 90s or from Claremont, but it's infinitely better than the mess we had before Jonathan Hickman took over, and better than what we've gotten since he left and or got ran off the series. The issue starts with a flashback to shortly after the X-Men moved to Krakoa. Kitty Pryde meets with her rabbi to complain about not being able to use the Krakoan gates, and her rabbi plays a typical role of talking around her instead of addressing what Kitty is saying. She wraps up by asking if Kitty still believes in God, which is a strange question considering there's a literal God on the world's premier superhero team. Obviously, Kitty would still believe in the Jewish God. Whether she would think that being is what he's typically been described as in her religion is a different question. They don't get into that, however the rabbi does say something kind of strange. She says as Kitty's leaving, quote, "But God believes in you, and we have to give in to her ride." Now, I'm no expert on Judaism, ancient, modern, or what have you, but I'm pretty sure rabbis don't refer to God as a she. This comes across as Jerry Duggan just throwing that in there because reasons. If anyone knows any different, let me know. Anyway, it jumps to 10 weeks after the Orchis attack. Kitty goes to what's left of the X-Mansion, walks up to her old room, reaches through the floorboards, and pulls out some swords with a note attached. The note reads, quote, "You will forever be the weapon that made you, Shadowcat. Signed, Ogun." That's right. Kitty Pryde is going full-on ninja. I'm loving all of that. The X-Men on the run, fighting for their lives. That's when I like the X-Men the most. Anyway, Dr. Stasis makes a public statement spinning the Orchis attack as a retaliation for mutants poisoning the medicine they share with humans. For those who missed the Hellfire Gala comic, Dr. Stasis planted an element in the drugs that allows him and Orchis to control and even kill humans anytime they want. The press gobbles up his spin about wanting to help mutants despite their so-called attack. What struck me as weird is how no one comments on Dr. Stasis looking exactly like Mr. Sinister. After all, he is a clone of Sinister, who was a well-known criminal for years and was on Krakoa and part of the Quiet Council. You'd think someone would notice that this guy who is apparently a mutant is suddenly teamed up with an anti-mutant task force, but nope, not a peep. I hope that at some point someone mentions it because it's really odd that everyone would ignore this. Then we get the scene that looks like something right out of Days of Future Past, where Fei Long, who works for Orchis and is a rival to Tony Stark, tries to convince the president that Orchis has everything under control. The truth is probably close to that, however Orchis is doing this by setting up prisons, like the Henry Gyrich Center for Behavioral Studies, for mutants who remain on Earth. Like I said, this has serious Days of Future Past vibes. Tucked in a cell in this prison is Cyclops. Dr. Stasis has done him dirty. Not only has he refused to help Scott with his broken back, but he's also had Scott's eyes sewn shut. He tries to get Cyclops to sell out the mutants, take the blame for the staged mutant massacre, and then get all the remaining mutants to leave Earth, to which Scott gives a very hearty, "Go fuck yourself." Meanwhile, what's left of the X-Men try to plot revenge on Orchis. Somehow Synch and Talon are here even though they got nuked by Nimrod. I'll chalk that up to Talon's healing factor and Synch copying that power. The rest of the group is Rasputin and Miss Marvel. In the middle of their planning session, Shadowcat appears. She's been on a one-woman revenge spree and doesn't really care about what happens to her. She feels like the X-Men have failed. She winds up going on Mars to get more information about the other mutants, and bumps into some guy from Earth who was just dumped on Mars by Orchis. Apparently, the mutants of Arakko aren't fond of their so-called weakling cousins, so the Earth mutants are treated like trash. Unfortunately for Woofer, which is what he calls himself, he sees Kitty come through the gate, and instead of backing off like she asked, he keeps bothering her, so she phases her sword into his chest and threatens/recruits him into finding any X-Men on Arakko and checking for anyone on the list of names she gives him. Then she bounces. I'm loving how this story is going. I'm interested, I'm invested, I'm digging this whole dark Kitty Pryde thing, and because it's feeling so good, something just had to happen to ruin the flow. In comes Kamala Khan, and one of the dumbest decisions I've ever seen in comics. So here's the deal. Marvel killed off the comic book version of Kamala Khan so they could make her a mutant. This was a tie into her MCU counterpart. There was no other reason to do it. It was just a marketing ploy that everyone saw through. However, in the comic, Kamala is an Inhuman, and the Terrigen Mist that grants Inhumans their power is usually fatal to mutants. So if she accesses her mutant powers, this could kill her, which means she should avoid using her powers. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is that Kamala's family and friends think she's dead. She tells Emma Frost, who's using the alias Hazel Kendall, that her parents have probably figured out that she's Miss Marvel since both died on the same day. That seems unlikely, but whatever. The important part is that Emma decides to erase Kamala's death from her friends and family's memory and erase any government record of her dying as well. Now, I'm not claiming anyone actually cared all that much about Kamala being killed, but this cheapens what was already a cheap death. If you're just gonna erase it, what was the point? You could have come up with any other contrivance to explain how Kamala went from being an inhuman to a mutant. And by the way, are you gonna swing by Peter and wipe his mind too? This was supposed to be a big deal for Spider-Man. Surely you wouldn't want him to remember. But then we get to problem number 3, which is that Emma tells Kamala that her parents won't know that she's an inhuman, mutant, or Miss Marvel, and then says, quote, "Forget that you're a mutant and stay away from the X-Men." Wait, what? The whole in-story reason for resurrecting Kamala was to use her to show the humans that mutants weren't all that bad. The X-Men were all excited about this idea, and for Kamala to discover her powers, even though none of them knew if it would kill her. Now you want her to forget she even has mutant powers? What is this plot? This makes no sense. You've undermined both reasons for killing and resurrecting her. Wouldn't it just have been easier to have her discover she was a mutant? Maybe the Terrigen Mist begins to fail and her mutant powers start to surface. Maybe they develop alongside the inhuman powers, which causes her to seek out the X-Men, hoping they've got a cure for the effects of the Terrigen Mist since it's apparently so deadly to them. You didn't have to kill her off only to undo it and now not even let her use the mutant powers. This whole thing is silly. The follow-up, however, is not. Kamala decides to stay with the X-Men despite the risks. Then Emma asks Kitty about what happened when she fell through the gate. The answer? She opened up a can of whoop-ass. When the guards find her, Kitty immediately realizes she's got a tactical advantage being the only one of the mutants who can use the gates. However, if that info gets out, the X-Men will lose that advantage, so she can't let the guards report her, which means she can't leave any of them alive. The guards assume that because she's got this phasing power and was trained by Xavier that she's not a threat. Oh boy, were they wrong. The things this woman does to them, the creative ways she uses her powers. She phases one dude's gun into his head. She phases 2 guys into each other. To be fair, I don't even know how that works because she has to touch something in order to phase it, but damn if it don't look cool. She phases one dude into the ground head first, and my favorite, she phases grenades into 2 guys' chests. She just plows through everybody, and then when she gets to the final guy, he's like, "Wait, the X-Men saved me once." And Kitty goes, "Yes, that's what the X-Men do. They save everybody they can, even their enemies. Shame those X-Men are dead now," and snaps his neck. Yes to all of this. I need more of this Kitty pride. Please and thank you. Now, Kitty doesn't tell Emma any of this. She just goes, "Nothing happened." But she does tell Emma her plan. She's gonna kill Firestar, the supposed traitor who's actually working as a spy. Aside from that goofy nonsense with Kamala, this was a great issue and a solid setup for the fall of X. It's starting to feel like an X-Men comic. Overall, I am in. You have me. Let's see if you can keep me. That Iceman stuff ain't gonna work. I need more of this, cause this was good. I read this twice in a row. I can't remember the last time I read an X-Men book twice in a row. Please don't make me regret enjoying this book. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.